Okay, so we're going to get started. This, by the way, one of probably the most important webinars that you will ever watch, because this particular topic is something that attorneys at all levels do not understand. I was talking yesterday to someone that had, 15 years of experience and had worked in two of the top law firms. I say top, the most difficult law firms to get positions in the country, and had been unable to secure a position. And after 7 or 8 months, and had left his wife and child in the United States, and had, because he was trying to get a job and actually relocated to another country where he was from because of the fact that he did not understand these rules. This is what I'm going to talk about today. It's how to do a job search. It's something that has made me, in terms of the work that I do, has enabled me to be successful and find jobs for people that other people normally wouldn't. Let me just go back here a second. Honestly, it's probably the most important webinar you're ever going to watch today. And I encourage you to pay attention. I encourage you to also not to believe what I'm saying, because this particular strategy has saved thousands of people's careers and enabled them to actually become partners in law firms, to find jobs when they're not working, to have better lives for their families, and also for themselves. It's helped them become proud of being an attorney again. It's helped them to really learn how to believe in themselves as opposed to feeling like a failure. Because the fact of the matter is, anyone who gets a law degree and passes the bar, I don't care who you are. I don't care how well you did in law school. I don't care what your job history is. If you understand this principle I'm talking about today, you will get a job. You will get a job if you're fired. You will get a new job, a better job. If you don't currently have a job and you're looking for a job, if you're a law student, you will get a job. If you have a troubled career history, you will get a job. Anybody that follows what I'm talking about today is going to be able to get jobs throughout your entire career. And honestly, you will change how you feel about yourself in everything that you do. Anyway, so I will get started on this. I apologize for this short delay. Okay. And then just a couple final things to tell you. This is a live webinar. At the end of the webinar, we'll take a short break just for a minute or two for questions. And then what's going to blow your mind is I will do sample job searches with people in different locations in the country, different practice areas. And so and I can't do it for everyone, but I'll do it for a few people. If you tell me in chat after the webinar what your practice area is and where you're located or where you're searching for jobs, I will show you, in most cases, maybe less than 100 jobs, but probably 80 to 90 places. Or if you're searching in major areas like New York, Los Angeles, I will show you hundreds, if not thousands, of potential jobs. So I hope you stick around to the end of this webinar and type in your practice area or in location, or don't do that. Stick around and watch what other people do, because this is just going to change everything that you think about in terms of looking for a job. For the past several years, I have been interacting with attorneys looking for jobs on a daily basis. When I say doing this, I literally am doing this with hundreds of people on a daily basis. I've also been working, and again, when I say interacting, I'm talking about emails and webinar calls and things. That I've also been working with recruiters at BCG Attorney Search who are trying to find attorneys jobs. And in terms of my history of working with hundreds of, I would say, probably well over 100 recruiters who have worked in our company, as well as literally, I would say, tens of thousands of attorneys, not just at BCG Attorney Search, but other companies that I've been working with, other people I've been working with as well. That's a pretty large number of people. I would say here. Yeah, it's a pretty large number of people. So when I say that, I'm telling you right now that when you're looking for a job, the smartest thing you can do is do things in in the conventional way. So just briefly, everyone that's looking for a job is going on to sites like Law Crossing, Indeed, Glassdoor, Leap. That's where everybody's hanging out and looking for jobs. And if you want to look for jobs that way, you have to understand that you're going to be competing with everyone else. So if anyone has a better qualification than you, they're going to be the ones that most likely get the job. Now you may have the best qualification, but if you don't, you're competing with everyone else for that job. Not only are you competing with everyone else for the job, but if your application is not first, then your meaning comes out in the first day or two. The odds are pretty good that that law firm or whatever, or company has already started interviewing people, because the companies interview people, or law firms and companies interview the first people. If you're an HR person, and I'm not knocking them, but if you're an HR person, you don't want to spend a lot of time looking at resumes. You're under pressure. Typically in the first couple of days when a resume comes in, those would be the people that get interviewed. Now that's not always the case, but in a lot of cases it is, because people that are in this role do not want to have to open or look at hundreds of different resumes. Really, all they want to do is fill the position because someone, law firm, losing money, or a partner needs someone right away. So typically the first applicants will get the job. So if you're going onto these websites and looking for jobs, you have a real problem, because those jobs are not necessarily being filled. They're being filled often from the first applicants. Now, I did want to say something about a website, and because I own the website and I've always tried to get attorneys jobs in unconventional ways. But the site that I own, Law Crossing, is interesting because what it does is it goes to law firm and company websites that don't necessarily aren't advertised. So when I say not advertised, I mean that we find them on the law firm or company website. That's the only place they are. Sometimes they're on kind of niche sites. There's hundreds of niche sites and all over. There's legal newspapers, there's association sites, and things like that. So and again, I'm not trying to sell you on something, but I'm telling you that the reason for that site is because it helps you find jobs that no one else that are publicized. You're often better finding positions that are not publicized. When you're looking for a position, your best strategy by far is to look where other attorneys are not looking, meaning you can certainly look on major job sites, but if you look on small association sites, small legal newspapers, or legal newspapers often, things like that, then you're going to be, or Law Crossing, again, I'm promoting my own site, but I'm just telling you, but those are on law firm and company sites. And you may ask yourself, what's the benefit of going to a law firm site? Because I can do that myself. No, you can't. There are, again, if you want to do that, you can go to the law firm sites of 10, 20,000 law firms and see if they have jobs on them. But most of the time when you're looking for jobs on law firm sites, you're just looking at the major firms that everyone knows about. If an attorney was looking for a job, the ones who look for jobs in a different way often get the best jobs. If you are, and I'll just give you some more detail, you're looking at Law Crossing or small legal newspaper or an association website, meaning you're a personal injury litigation attorney. So there's tons of websites just for personal injury attorneys. I've seen this work, or the big thing, even necessarily more effective than using an association site or a Law Crossing or something, is finding these thousands of firms that do work in your practice area in different locations, and just applying without them having a job. This works. And I talk to unemployed attorneys on a daily basis. Not only that, and this is just very disturbing, but LTG, for example, we have a lot of candidates. When I say a lot, there's 10,000 plus people that are in our system that have given us their resume, that we've reviewed, that have filled out questionnaires, that we've worked with to find position, and they believe, many of them, meaning if I take 10,000 attorneys, I would say that 9,000 of them, or maybe 8, believe that the job search should be done in a certain way. They think they know everything, even though our database and We've invested tens of millions of dollars, and we have information that goes back over 25 years. Now, I want to be clear with you. I'm not promoting BCG here because you have to have certain qualifications to work with BCG, meaning you have to be in a certain practice area, certain and well-defined practice area. There has to look like we can place you into a law firm. But what I've seen is from the attorneys I work with at BCG, and again, I'm not promoting BCG because not something that we can place everyone in, but that actually we can, but it's a whole different story. But meaning we can place people, but not necessarily if you're a law student or you don't have a certain type of experience, then we can't place you because employers pay us to find people jobs. But what I've learned is that attorneys who are able to do things in a different way in their search get the best results. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that right now, and then tell you some examples of attorneys that I've worked with that have gotten incredible results despite having horrible things in their background. I'll just tell you right now, just so you understand what I'm going to talk about in a minute. An attorney that was unemployed for several years. When I say several, I don't know, 5, 7 years. I don't know what it was, but employed for several years because he was working in Los Angeles as a partner of a big firm, then had gone to Washington, D.C. To work as I think a commissioner for the SEC, which is a big job. And then it came out that he had actually married a second woman in Washington, D.C. So he had 2 wives, and it was all over the press. And I got him a job for that. I got at the same firm I found, I got another woman that had a well-publicized lawsuit against her former employer. So these are things that you can do when you apply this stuff. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about this. So Sun Tzu, or I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. This is some principles of what he has taught a long time ago or written about. And so this is a system that you can follow that works in your job search. In The Art of War, he defines 8 types of ways of fighting the enemy. And I think one of the most interesting ones he talks about is something called deadly ground and heavy ground. In terms of your search, assuming that finding a job is finding something is to go undetected and on enemy territory before attacking. And this will make sense in a second. But what that means is you use the element of surprise when you're fighting with an opponent to win the war. So this is heavy ground. And he believed that this is the best kind of battle. And this is considered like a battle of art. And then in deadly ground, what happens is you meet face to face with your opponent, and there's no means of escape. Like you have no way of escaping your opponent. So this is how that works. And then it's a battle of brute force, and in both sides, there's likely to be casualties. And he believes that this is the worst kind of battle. Deadly grounds without art, and allowing this to happen reflects poorly on the commander of the troops. And here you would be a job searcher. So here's a heavy ground battle. In a heavy ground battle, so in heavy ground battle, a weak force can and definitely paralyze a much stronger one. In terms of different types of war, most people are taught to march in unison and do things in the same manner as everyone else. And this particular job search strategy, which I'll talk about in a second, is very common in the job search market, meaning most people are fighting on heavy ground, doing the same thing that everyone else is doing, searching for a job. Most people, when they're searching for a job, go to the same large websites, sit around waiting for jobs. It's just, I believe, insanity. Then applying to the jobs that come up, and then applying with everyone else that's applying to the same job. Great. So if you went to Harvard Law School and you were at the top of your class and you were working at a best firm, then obviously you may be a very competitive applicant. But if you're not, what do you do? And the same thing happens with people that go to large website and apply for jobs. So those people, the people that use recruiters, the same thing happens to them. People will often look for a job using the same recruiters. And I am not trying to bash other recruiters, but I'll just tell you an example of using the same recruiters. I had a candidate that was in Washington, D.C., and he lost his first job because within 6 months, because someone had asked him to do some sort of work and he had found a way that if he did the work, it was going to waste the client's money. He came and told a partner that, who was young and very excited about generating money from this client, and was fired. And a very good candidate. I think he had been at the top of his class at University of Chicago Law School. And he went and contacted recruiters to help him get a job in Washington, D.C. or whatever, New York. I don't remember, this years ago, but to get jobs in those different cities. And each recruiter had told him, we don't have any jobs, so we can't help you. And despite his qualification, and because no one was looking for 6-month attorneys. So I went and realized that there are hundreds of good law firms in Washington, D.C., like big major names that would be interested in him. And I applied him, helped him apply to all those firms. And he did very well and got interviews and job offers, whereas no one in any recruiter would not have found those awesome firms and sent him to them without opening. And as a matter of fact, using that strategy, I have gotten thousands of people jobs, but most people in that candidate situation would not have allowed me to do that. They would think I was crazy. But ultimately, I got him interviewed, very, very best firm, maybe like the top firm without any openings in those cities. People, when they're looking for a job in law school, this is common at every law school. Again, I'm not criticizing law schools, how they find jobs, but most people, when they're looking for jobs, they do the exact same thing as everybody else. They do the same thing as other candidates at their firm. So at their school or that they know. For example, like I went to University of Virginia Law School. This is years ago, but I really wanted to work in Chicago because I had gone to college in Chicago and love the city. And not only that, I'm from Michigan and it's Detroit area and it's a 5-hour drive. So I thought it would be to work in Chicago and go back there. So what happened to me? Virginia's a lot of East Coast firms. And then as you move out of New York and Virginia and Washington, D.C., there's fewer and fewer jobs. And so there were only at that time I don't know if it's top 10 or top 15 law school anymore, but at that time, I think it was like number 5 or 7 or something, I don't remember. But there were only like 3 or 4 firms that came from Chicago who did on-campus interviewing. And when I applied, I got interviews at 2 on-campus interviews, and I got 1 call back and didn't get the job. That's crazy. I didn't have to just rely on career service to get a job. I should have applied on my own. And again, that would be doing like a heavy ground battle. It would help you to get a job when otherwise not. I mean, you just apply to firms or companies without necessarily have openings. Again, like when you're fighting in heavy, deadly ground, which I was when I was applying through on-campus interviews, because I only had 5 options of a city with hundreds of interviews. I was competing with everyone else trying to get a job in Chicago from University of Virginia, which again, only 5 firms. Not only that, I was competing with everyone else that those firms did interviews with at Northwestern, University of Chicago, University of Michigan. That's a lot of freaking schools competing for jobs in Chicago. Probably not a good idea to try to compete with everyone that's doing on-campus interviews. So again, when you're fighting on heavy ground, what you're doing is you're competing with every single other person that's trying to get the same job, and you're competing based on the strength of your resume. That's it. You're up against everyone else. And again, if I only had 1 option to get a job and call back interview, that's crazy, right? That's not good, right? The problem when people search for jobs, meaning any way you're searching for jobs, is you don't give yourself any edge compared to other applicants beyond what you already have, meaning you're just applying with everyone else to the exact same places. You're competing face to face with other applicants, and under some do the one with more firepower would win. So I just want you to understand, I do not care who you are. Like if you are applying to jobs where other people are applying, there's likely to be people better than you. So again, even if let's just call this out. So let's say you're a graduate of Stanford Law School and you did very well there. And maybe you are in law review, I don't know. And maybe you did a circuit court clerkship, meaning clerk for a federal circuit judge. But over the past 4 years or 5 years, you've had 3 separate law firms done. So just that alone, because you don't look like you're going to stick around, regardless of how great Stanford is, and maybe you went to Princeton and whatever, but you're going to have a very difficult time getting a job because you're going to look unstable. And so they will choose someone that looks stable. So what I'm trying to say is, and maybe went to Georgetown, I don't know, but that person has been on the job at the same firm for 5 years. So regardless of who you are, I'm telling you that if you're applying for the same jobs, there's often, very likely, going to be better applicant for that job than you. And so in most cases, meaning if there's 100 resumes, submitted for a job, regardless of how awesome you think you are, you're probably, with 100 people, likely to lose. Not only that, but as I said earlier, in most cases when there's a job, and if that job's on LinkedIn and then they push it onto Indeed or whatever, you're competing with a lot of people. And because you're competing with a lot of people, you're also competing with the first applicant. I said this earlier, but I want you to understand this. So imagine you're like an HR person and someone comes to you, or you're just you're a partner that has to hire people. So you're sitting there and all of a sudden you post a job somewhere, all of a sudden these coming, like just boom, in your email or whatever. They can be in an applicant tracking system, where they're just like, boom, they just keep coming in. You're under pressure. And again, when I say that, it's like insane. There'll just be like tons of them piling in. And it's almost always, doesn't matter where the law firm is. It could be in rural Indiana. But if they have a job, everyone that needs a job is going to start applying to that. So what happened is those employers, that if you're the HR person sitting there, you're told that you need to get good applicants for this job, and we're losing money. We need someone, or in some cases, partner may quit. They don't have any support. You need to find someone immediately. So what they do, and what I'm getting, they're human, and it's not like they're doing anything wrong. Out of all these resumes that are piling in, they'll look at the first day, maybe the second day, they'll pick 2, maybe, or 1 or 3 to interview. And then that's what happened. And instead of just waiting, looking at the piles of resumes keep coming in day after day, they choose people from that and then they bring those people in. So when they bring those people in, what happened is they bond with that person, meaning there's a relationship, or they like that person, and they don't want to sit here and be disloyal and interview other people. They don't want to take attorney time. So attorneys billing at $500 an hour. They don't want to sit there and interview 10 people. They want to bill hours. They don't want to lose billable hours, or they have other things to do. So again, they are going to hire in most cases from the first applicant. And the first applicants means that they don't want to waste a lot of time hiring. They don't want to waste a lot of their attorney time with all these applicants. They're going to bond with the first people to bring them in. And so you may sit there and think, oh, great job on Indeed or whatever, but the job may be 5 days old, and that's going to mess you up. Again, there's a lot going on here when you're competing with other people. And if you do some sort of guerrilla warfare, you're going to be much better off than if you do not. And this is the sort of thing that I read and hear about on the news on a daily basis. So guerrilla warfare is something that is incredibly effective, but something I read about in the news on a daily basis. What's an example? People blowing up Humvees during the Iraqi war. So people are driving on a road, there's no one there, and then something goes off and they're blown up from that. People flying airplanes. That's like with the 9/11, that's like a form of guerrilla warfare. And look how upset people get, like how much damage that does to a country, and how much anger it causes. Or soldiers, that the Vietnam War was, a lot of what happened there is there were issues in that war because people were popping out of bushes, killing people. And then Israel, for example, that with Hamas. Look how incredibly crazy that got, or because people came through fences and killed 1,000 people or whatever. It's very guerrilla warfare is a very serious thing because I'm sorry, but it works to destabilize people, and very upsetting. But example is even the Vietnam War. I'm not going to argue with long ago, but that was something that the U.S. arguably lost. And so you hear about terrorists in the news all the time. It's just something that going on. People don't like terrorists, and because it's something that, I'm sorry, but it's effective in destabilizing people where it happens. Afghanistan and not going on anymore, but there's guerrilla fighting all over. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that and how that relates to your job search, which may sound a little crazy, but anytime you find someone in a way that breaks the rules they're accustomed to, forces them to develop new rules, and you introduce elements of surprise and uncertainty, and it makes things very difficult for your opponent. Just think about, how much people get upset with guerrilla war and how it works. You have the U.S. losing Vietnam, but you also have, when people are young, with textbooks, they learn about the guerrilla warfare that American colonists used against the British in the American Revolutionary War with and the War of Independence. At the start of that particular war, basically our country is around democracy without the British because of it. But prior to fighting of the U.S., the British had defeated France in the Indian Wars and were considered a superpower, like the biggest military in the world. And then most effective. In contrast, the Americans largely consisted of hunters, merchants, farmers, and people who only volunteered to fight when these battles got closer to their homes. And so meaning people in the U.S. were fighting guerrilla warfare, meaning they weren't. Then I'll talk a little bit about that. So here's are some lessons real quick from your legal job search and from the American Revolution. Again, I'm not trying to bore people with history lesson, but it is relevant. So the British troops had been taught to fight their opponents in open field side by side. It was something that was originally developed by Frederick the Great, meaning they all marched, and they also wore bright red uniforms to these fights, and they would walk shoulder to shoulder. And then when they got close, they would fire muskets and level their muskets and fire the muskets at colonists. But then the colonists, in the way like the American Indians at that time were fighting, they would hide behind trees, and they would do things like that when the British were lined up in these lines fighting that way. So that's how it worked with them. And so these American settlers were just completely outnumbered. The British could send as many people as they want to the U.S. And if they'd fought the way the colonists fought, meaning just all in one line and not using these guerrilla tactics, they probably would have never won. So they organized small groups that would come and attack and then quickly retreat. And then they would fire, again, hiding in fields, behind trees, all these sorts of things. And so because of that, I just want you to understand how that worked and why it's effective. Into your job search, the Americans were difficult to kill. So if you're British and you're marching in a straight line, firing musket, but the people that you're really fighting are fighting from trees and whatever, behind rocks, and they're very difficult to hit. And so the people that are hiding and doing things behind trees are able to kill a lot of people. And in contrast, the British were just doing things one way. They would kill them and retreat. And again, they would line up, the British would, and then the guerrillas would attack them that way. They would do that with supply wagons that were coming in, messenger, all sorts of people. So how do you win your job search? So these sort of guerrilla tactics are widely believed to help Americans win the revolution, establish country. The British were doing something different. And what's funny, because it relates to your job search again, the Americans were criticized for not fighting fairly. Not fair to not line up and do things the way everyone else is doing. But the colonists had watched the way the Native Americans fought, and it was the same type of guerrilla warfare. It was very effective, and they learned how to fight that way. And there's a book, I guess it's called Almost a Miracle And by talking about the victory of the Americans at the War of Independence, he said the colonists learned how to minimize the chances of an enemy ambush, sometimes employed a hit and run style of fighting, often used mobile strategy, not infrequently adopted terror tactic, included. And again, I'm not promoting this or anything, but they would torch the Indians would torture people, they would kill women, children, and that sort of thing. British were not nice. And the England's career soldiers called the way that British fought a regular war, Bush War, American way of war, and everyone thought that the war should be conducted in a gentlemanly way. This particular strategy, Bush's other being targeted, was not something the British believed in. And again, people are doing their job search. They believe, or they're taught in school or whatever, other people are doing, they need to use these things a certain way. The colonists fought differently, and these soldiers were considered gentlemen more than soldiers and used to working in comfort compared to the way others were fighting. They were actually well taken care of while they were their comforts when they were marching on the battlefield. And when the U.S. fighting against this established way of doing things, helped them win the war and arguably established the U.S. as a colony. The U.S. now is fighting guerrillas, just as other places are. They're doing things the same way as others are doing. And when they're fighting, one of the people that are terrorists. So when you're looking for a job, in my belief, one of the most important things that you can do is fight in a guerrilla-like fashion on heavy ground, which that means, in my opinion, this is absolutely the most important thing you can do in your job search. So you believe that you only can apply to openings. You believe that it's not the right thing to do to apply to places without openings. You believe that all these different things, that if a recruiter tells you there's only one or two jobs, that those are the only places you can work. You believe that if you're unemployed, you need to continue applying to only, if you have a really strong background, only the best firms with jobs, or all these things that are just insane. And so let me just talk to you a little bit about how to choose how to search for a job. And my job search philosophy, and one of the reasons that I've been so successful, meaning place more people than probably anyone ever in my position. I'm not bragging, but it's just this method of doing things works, and I happen to apply it. And so it's not like again, I'm not going to talk a little bit about what I do, but I help people get jobs on heavy ground, meaning things that other people aren't doing, terrorist ways of looking for a job, rather than deadly ground. This is not a big deal, but I've always brought in a lot of money, millions of dollars usually. Then even when I was starting in my garage, I made over $1 million in fees my first year of recruiting. So it doesn't matter ever if it's a recession, good year, but a bad year, or I've never failed to bring in these sorts of fees. And it's not because there's anything, I'm not a salesperson. I don't convince people to do things. I just have a different way of looking at things than other recruiters have. So I'm actually much more academic than social. I don't spend a ton of time like going to events and trying to network. And also, again, I'm not trying to sell things. What I do is I try to get people to fight in heavy ground. And this is really the biggest secret to my success. So let me tell you a little bit about what's something that's interesting. And I like to tell the story a lot. And I think it's very relevant to your job search. I think that it changed my career when I learned about it. So I had my first job at a very Quinn Emanuel, but then I was hired at this other firm, Dewey Ballantyne, which no longer exists, but it was a New York firm. And when I was hired to sit right next to this attorney that had never lost a case, and he was at that point probably in his 60s. He was a litigator, never lost a case, and he worked for some really big name people that paid huge fees, like the Salt No. 9, all this stuff. I had this case with him, and he was having me work on it, and it turned into a class action, meaning there were all these different firms, and so there were like 50 firms that were representing all these people that were all these companies that were being sued in California, it's called Proposition 65. And it was this thing where if you were doing something without putting warnings on it that could cause cancer or whatever, I think this case, cigars, then they could come in and sue you and you would try to settle. But these 50 firms did not want to settle, probably because they were getting fees. They were representing giant drugstore chains, giant hotel chains, gas station chains, like all these people that had sold cigars without any warnings. So I was working in this case, and this attorney that I was working for that never lost a case, he had me working on all this research that was just like, literally for someone that's selling cigars. I think it was the Sultan of Brunei that owned the Hotel Bel Air that we were representing. And writing all these research, like researching the statute, researching all of this stuff. And so it got very interesting. Like he would have me do so much research, just basically carte blanche, working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for 30 days. So these class actions were every big firm, Morrison and Foerster, Latham, like every big firm in LA was in this class action. So he had me do all of this research. And what I found was, I looked at the legislative record and saw that the intent of the statute different than what these people were suing for. And then I looked at tax law and saw that under tax law, these people that were suing were not really a nonprofit, all these little things that just completely turned the case upside down. So we went to this hearing in it was Department 51 of the LA County Courts, and all of these big firms were there. And I think the lead attorney was a very well-known woman from Latham, got up and argued. But while she was arguing, I was like, this is wrong. This woman was like a 55 and a well-known attorney. I was like, this way she's approaching this wrong. This is what the law is. And so I passed her all this stuff. And again, I'm a young attorney. I've been in the law firm world only a year and a half. So she saw this and she said, you need to get up here. And she asked me to make some comments. And the judge was like, wow, we need this briefed and everything. I don't know what happened to all those cases, but I know that this attorney that had me do all this in-depth research more than other people would do, just go way down this rabbit hole of research. And he would always win cases every time. He had this one case where he was representing Playboy Playmate that had been gone to this Playboy Playmate, that he was representing a very rich person that had brought them in a foreign country to his house and had them dance in discos and stuff. And allegedly, one of them said she thought she was drugged and fell asleep, woke up, didn't know what happened. So he's suing. So all these lawsuits, and to my astonishment, he worked on these for a long time, not long, and then got these people that were suing, these very rich people, to pay him for putting him through that. This is really powerful stuff. And he did it because he just kept researching and researching. I think they fought service of process and they followed this and that. But this is very effective. When you fight on heavy ground, you're much more likely to succeed. This is what that attorney did. This is what I learned. You have to go deep. You can't just look at, this guy had looked at, oh, this is what the law says, let's fight it. And you have to go and look at everything. Who goes and looks at the legislative history of something? Who does that? And then looking at the debates on the legislature floor, no one does that. Or goes and researches tax law and how it applies to someone suing you, and if they're really doing tax things. So this is what I did. And in my position, I have 10,000 candidates, say, that I'm sending jobs to. If I send them firms that I believe that they should apply to, they think what I'm doing is unethical. Why would he send me firms to apply to that don't necessarily have jobs? And I do that because that work, and it's different than what other people are doing. It's different than what you think you should do in a job search. I'm going to show you at the end of this webinar how well that worked. But most attorneys are drilled into, they believe that's not right, that it's unethical. You need to apply to jobs. That's like the British marching into war and believing that people need to fight face to face. Most attorneys believe that they should do that. And even recruiters in our own company like literally 20 plus years of 25 years of recruiters in this company always believe that they should be applying just to their candidates to jobs. What they do. And again, I'm hate being critical of recruiters that work for me, but most of the time, before submitting a candidate to a law firm, they check with the firm. They're like, hey, would you have an interest in this person? And most of the time, a lot of the time, law firms won't respond because they're just like only responding when there's a job. Not all the time. It's probably a few percentage points, like 10, 20. Other times they'll just say no because they don't necessarily want to circulate the resume. This is the old whatever. But if they do receive the resume, these firms, then they will circulate it. They'll send it to people. So this type of recruiting is how almost every recruiter operates. And almost every recruiter does not earn the sort of money that they're capable of earning. Meaning, if they were doing more than just submitting openings, they might make 2-3 times more placements. But they believe, just like the British believe when they were fighting in a certain way, that's not the way to do things because that's how they've been taught. Even if Harrison teaches them that, they're uncomfortable. The firm may say, don't submit people without opening, very rarely, but they want to do things the way that the law firm does. These are some unconventional strategies for legal success. When I started recruiting, this way of recruiting that everyone else was doing did not make any sense whatsoever because I'd learned this lesson from this attorney that had never lost a case. Meaning, this guy was brought in when other people just couldn't do things. Representative, I'm not trying to say it's right or wrong, the Catholic Church and all these other people, and did things in a way that for sexual abuse, obviously, but it didn't make any sense whatsoever because if the law firm has an opening, all the recruiters in a given city are going to be submitted every candidate they can to the firm without an opening. And so they'd call a ton of attorneys in the city. So this is how it works. You understand, a law firm has an opening, the recruiter gets it, and they start calling every attorney in the city with the best qualifications about that job and trying to get their resume to submit them. That's pretty much how it works. If you're in New York and you're at a big firm, that happened. So they're going to start submitting all the people that they can recruit. And then very quickly, depending on the practice area and location, the law firm would receive tons of candidates in that city and have their pick among them. And what's crazy, just so you understand that also the way recruiting works and has always worked. So say you're sitting in New York or Los Angeles and maybe you get a call from a recruiter and then the recruiter has a job opening and they really want to submit you to it. And then you send them a resume and then they apply you to the job. But then what happens next? Like you almost always will not get an interview. And sometimes you will. And then if you don't get the interview, the recruiter will not call you. You'll just be, or they might not even respond to your email. You'll just be having applied to that job and no information whatsoever from the recruiter other than the call and the sending the resume. That's it. And then you're like, what the hell happened? Other times, if you get the interview, then the recruiter will try to talk you into doing well in the interview and then get an offer. They will do everything they can to take it, whatever. I had recruiters people brought them like all sorts of things. So the law firm will have their pick among people in the city. Law firm will have very, very odd. The odds will be really stacked against any attorney gets a phone call but recruiter from a job, if it's a big job. So what's a big job? An example, we don't do this because we get the jobs on our own, but there's services out there. One of the big ones the main one is called Leopard List. With Leopard List, what happens is they monitor the jobs at maybe the top 100 or maybe a little bit more than that, 200, I don't know, but jobs at the law firm. The second they get them, email all the recruiters in a given city that subscribe, they pay thousands of dollars a year. So they get these jobs. And then they also have lists of the attorneys that match those jobs. And then they start emailing and calling. The Leopard List also provides them a list of attorneys in the big firms. And they start emailing and calling all those firms candidates about the job. So that's just how it works. And so most of the candidates that they don't submit their resume and all this, do submit their resume, don't get the job. So I know from experience that if you're competing against other candidates for the same jobs, you're gonna your odds are very low. I started looking at unconventional method of getting people jobs. I did that because I had learned from this incredible attorney that had never lost a case how to do this sort of job search, because I knew that that worked. It does. And so I was early in my career, I was working with yeah. So earlier in my career, I used to read all these legal literature because I wanted to learn what was going on in all these different firms. And so I was sitting there one day and I got the San Francisco Daily Journal. And again, I'm in LA. And there's an article quoting this partner in the small law firm that I'd never heard of. And he's saying something to the effect of, I've been in business for 25 years. And I think it was corporate. He was a corporate attorney. And he said, I've never seen this much activity. We're so busy. We've set desks out in the halls. This in the small firms, incredible amounts of activity. He said that. I'll tell you, and it was a small firm. First of all, when I say that, it's the kind of firm that most recruiters would not be sending people to. In addition to that, the firm, most recruiters are not reading the San Francisco Daily Journal. They're submitting people to the same jobs they know about. So here's the strategy of heavy ground. What I did is once I saw all that activity, that I learned about that, I started submitting candidates that I had that couldn't get a job. And again, I'm a young recruiter. I'm just starting out. It's not that easy for me to get candidates necessarily because I'm not well known and all sorts of other things. So I had 3 candidates that they got jobs for. One was he hadn't practiced literally in 5 years. He had been discovered to be a polygamist. This is the guy he had been a partner in Los Angeles at a big firm. And then he had gone to Washington, D.C., and been a commissioner. And then after being a commissioner, married a woman in Washington, D.C. while he was still married to his existing wife and had a family. And then this came out and just was a complete pariah. I remember meeting with him. I was in Pasadena and this is where I lived. And he came to meet me in a restaurant. And then when he did that, he told me, I used to own this big house in Pasadena, all this stuff. And I'd known what happened to him. And when I was talking to him, just a nervous wreck. I looked at his nails and he had peeled away skin. And then he was biting his lip while he talked. So nervous. And I guess he'd been doing that for a while. So the lip was all swollen and scabs on it. But he was very upset. He had been a pariah in the legal community, and everyone knew about him, at least in Los Angeles. And because he couldn't get a job there, so his only option was to work up north. I had and he had never applied to work up north. Then again, this is for this firm that said they were extremely busy. And I'm telling you about these attorneys because these are people that would widely be considered completely unemployable. Some of them hadn't worked for 5 years, that had been thought to be a polygamist, lost his family, or been these are people with a lot of problems. The next person I had was a woman who had been sexually stalked. This guy was peeking in her apartment windows or whatever, and had been harassed by a professor in her law school. The law school ended up firing this professor because of his behavior, but then she didn't notice. But this woman was in Seattle. But this professor ended up getting a job at the law firm where she was scheduled to start working. So professor gets fired. He gets a job in this law firm. She maybe had been a summer associate there and then came back to that law firm after graduation. And incredibly, she showed up to work and this guy was in her office again. And I don't want to say something that's not true. It's 25 years ago, but I think that the man was her boss again, meaning she showed up there and this professor was her boss, and she had something else that happened. She was at this firm and I think she told them about this problem and they hadn't done anything. And this professor tried to break into her apartment, I think, one night. What happened is she filed a lawsuit, and law firms being what they were, I don't know, they maybe tried to figure out how to blame her or something. So all these news articles. And so she became considered a pariah in the legal community. So I found this firm that I read about in the Daily Journal that said they were busier. They had never seen so much work. And I sent these candidates there. Most recruiters never would have sent anybody there. They would require that even though the law firm said they were incredibly busy, they would require that they actually have official openings. And so this law firm ended up hiring attorneys I was sending because I was in this guerrilla tactic. And so I helped them compete, you would call heavy ground, meaning applying to places that other people aren't doing. And these people had big problems, news stories about things that they were involved in that normally would scare firms, but not this firm. They were small and need help. So these people had all been unemployed for a long time. They had gone to great law schools and had great experience. One had been a partner at an outstanding firm in LA. Another had gone to Berkeley or something and had been an associate at a really good firm in Seattle. If these people had only applied to large firms, which they had been doing, one for 5 years, the other for a while, I don't know, a year or something without employment, they didn't get jobs. So nothing. So they find Harrison and I apply them to start finding firms that other people aren't reading about or know about by reading legal publications. And so if you do your search on heavy ground, what that means is you're not applying to firms that everyone else is. You're using research and things like I did to find good places, and you're even sending your resume to places that don't have openings. There's certain law firms, for example, that I know about that are just always looking for different people. They might always be looking for people to do litigation, or they might always look for people to do corporate. I know about those firms. You don't have to use Harrison to find them. You need to apply to tons of firms that don't have openings, and you can probably find one. Same thing with like patent. There's always firms that are looking for patent. There's always firms looking for corporate. So in addition, if you're a smart job seeker, what you're going to do is you're going to look for jobs in smaller markets, meaning you're going to try to find jobs in places that are small, that don't necessarily aren't large. Instead of applying to firms if you're in Cleveland, firms in Cleveland, you might be smart applying to firms in Akron and other places like that. And this works, by the way. I have right now made just a placement. It's absolutely crazy. So one placement was of a attorney that had worked in Hong Kong for a major firm, New York, as a partner in a major firm without business, and maybe had worked in Singapore. But anyway, this person had been practicing for 30 years. And when he found me, he could not find a position. Nothing. He was getting interviews, didn't know what to do. He thought nothing was going to happen. So I went with that attorney and I helped him apply to an incredible number of firms. I found, I don't know, a lot of firms, 400 firms for him. And I don't think he let me send him to all of them. Maybe very selective, but I found a firm in Fort Wayne, Indiana, that had an incredible amount of, I don't know how, incredible amount of corporate related work. And they loved this guy. So he got interviews and a position with them. And, he was in Boston, he never been to Indiana, but I found a firm that was incredibly busy there. Then I had another woman, this is even crazier. She had been a litigator for a mid-sized firm in Delaware, had lost her job, then had decided, because Delaware is a difficult market for law firms and stuff from out of state, had decided that she would start doing corporate work, even though she'd never worked in a law firm, would start doing corporate work and asking law firms in different parts of the country if she could do corporate work. And so they started feeding her a little bit of corporate work. And so she'd been doing corporate work on her own for, 6 months or something, and came to me because she didn't have enough work and was looking for a job. And I found her another firm in someplace weird, Reno, Nevada, like law firm. I don't remember where it was. Not even Reno. It was Reno or something like that, needed someone to do just general corporate, not even Delaware corporate. And she got a job and they moved her across the country and they paid her moving expenses and paid, all this stuff they gave her. And she never would have gotten a job had I not been able to find that small law firm. Instead of working in Wilmington or whatever, she probably never could have gotten a job there. at least a decent sized firm. I helped her find jobs in smaller markets. And again, this happened recently, and corporate has been in the gutter, not doing well. These two people get jobs, one, a very senior attorney with great qualifications, but no one is going to hire him in a big city because he doesn't have any business and he's unemployed. And the next one was a woman in Delaware. But in each of these cases, there wasn't anybody these attorneys were competing with. They weren't competing with anyone. There's no one else applying to these jobs. This is a fantastic strategy. Like, it works. If you apply to places that other people aren't applying to, it's going to work. And I'm spending a lot of time on this with you, but the reason I'm telling you about this in so much detail is I really want to drive home this, because I don't care how you get a job. You can use me, you can whatever you do, but if you're going to do this, you need to do it on your own. So I'm telling you a little bit about mastering the art of heavy ground, your legal job search. One of the smartest things you can do is something like LawCross. Again, I'm not promoting this, but I'm telling you what I do. So on this site, we always post old job listings that companies and firms have posted in the past on a separate section of the website. So you look at old openings, and if you're applying to a firm that has a litigation opening for a third-year associate, then you go back and you look at it 1 year later, or 2 years later, the odds are that they may have an existing opening just because they have more work, or that person that was a third-year attorney that joined will likely, not always, leave in a couple of years. So applying to an old job is actually very smart. And if you apply to those places, you will often be able to get a job, even because the firm may have an opening and they haven't publicized it. And then, so most people, when they use a site like Law Crossing, will not, this is Law Crossing will do it, but they will not be looking at old openings. And this is a huge mistake in my opinion, because if someone leaves a law firm, there may be a job opening that has not been advertised yet. And so that law firm, people don't always start advertising when there's a need. They may delay it, and who knows? But if someone pops along that matches it, it's going to potentially be a job. And when I say I get attorneys jobs like this, I get people interviews doing this strategy multiple times a week. It works. So you're much better off applying to jobs right now than when it's advertised. Other thing you do is, I think you need to do, and I recommend this for anyone, targeted mass mailings to get jobs. This means that you send your resume via email to companies, and you can do it. Honestly, I recommend you print out letters and send that with envelope, because it tends to work better. But because, I'm sorry, when you think about it, if you are a law firm, most people are sending emails, very easy to delete an email or just not pay attention to it. But if you send a letter, like, that's freaking awesome, because the letter will basically come, the person will open it, it will sit on their freaking desk. They're not going to just throw it away, and they're going to look at it, remember it and whatever. And then they will be impressed that you took that extra effort. So sending a printed resume is just off the charts awesome, because it works. If you send your resume by email, you're doing the same thing that everyone else is. It's not necessarily the strongest, but this is the final thing, it's when you apply to a law firm without openings, this is, again, the most powerful possible thing I can tell you. When you apply to a firm without opening, there's often absolutely no competition for that job, because you're the only person that's applying. There's no freaking other person applying to that law firm that may have a need or whatever. You're the only person applying. So that's incredible, right? So there's no one else for them to consider other than you, and you've taken the initiative. They like that, and it works. These are very effective ways to get jobs. Since for law firms receiving hundreds of applications, it's obviously going to be much more difficult for you. You need to apply to places without opening, and you're going to have a lot more success when you do that than just looking at jobs, law firm website, major law firm website and job board. I'm really trying to help you here. This way of getting jobs, people don't like necessarily, because it's something that everyone else is doing. They may call it, when we do it at BCG, they call it scam. and all these things. And that's probably pretty harsh, but they don't necessarily, this method of applying for jobs, I've been criticized for this, law firms sometimes will say, don't send me resumes, but then those same resumes that people are not looking for jobs, but then those same firms then will will do it for people looking for jobs. And when this was happening, for example, the British criticized the colonists because they didn't like how they fought, and they would call it ungentlemanly and look upon it with disdain. When the colonists fought on heavy ground, though, they won. It's, as I told you earlier, we won the war because of fighting on heavy ground. The same thing happened when Americans met the Vietnamese in Vietnam. They were hiding in bushes, and you didn't even know who they were. Like, you could go into a village, and there can be these people that were after you, but you didn't know it. And so they would go in and they would look in huts, and then they would open things and find guns. And so they didn't know who the enemy was. So that's freaking awesome if you're the Vietnamese, because you're able to, people don't even know who you are. Think about that. They won. And so if you want to succeed in your job search, you're going to have to fight on heavy ground. You're going to have to do things in a way that other people aren't doing. This is my career. This is my life. It's what I stand for. It's what I've done my whole career. And if you understand this, what you need to do, you're never going to have a difficult time finding a job. And again, I talk to people, like, you're probably going to ask questions, or you're going to listen to other people's questions when we're done with this webinar, but pretty close. Everyone having a difficult time getting a job. This is what's missing. This one thing is what's missing from your job search. You're just applying. And not only that, if you do a search so I can show you hundreds of firms that I would apply to for different reasons. But if you do a search on heavy ground, meaning you go in and you do something that no one else is doing and apply to a lot of firms, you're going to be able to get a position. And if you do things normally, and I'm going to show you how to find those firms. You really need to focus on applying to places that may have openings you don't know about. Very effective. I can't stress enough how effective and how necessary this is to your job search. You need to apply to places without opening. You need to build giant list of firms, the cities you want to work in, like the research that I showed you earlier. You need to do all that. If you do that, your life and career will never be the same. So I'll take a quick break just for 1 or 2 minutes, so everyone can also take a break. When I come back, I will answer questions about this, and also I'll give some pretty exciting examples about things that people do that can, in their searches, that can make them ridiculously effective. Then I'll show you actual searches for candidates, not real candidates, in the BCG database and how that works. In just 1 minute, a couple of minutes, and we'll come back and question, and I'll do also examples. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to answer Q&A right now, but one thing, again, I want to encourage you to do, I know there's several hundred people on this webinar, but I want to right now encourage you, if you're looking, sometimes people are nervous doing this for different reasons, but I would encourage you to ask questions related to your own job search. You can make up a location if you want, and I will show you what I would do or what you should do to find a job in those areas. And then I will do some screen shares to show you how that would work. This is an example that we do when searching for jobs. I'll actually talk a little bit about this right now. These are jobs we look for candidates. One of the first things we do is because most people don't necessarily know how to do this, we will always make sure to set up people's practice areas properly. So that just means if you're applying to a job, your practice area needs to match. And what does that mean? That means that firms will only hire you most times for things that hire you for jobs that match your practice area. So say you are a litigator and you want to do corporate, your odds of getting hired are almost not good. And then it was this, then we look at different websites to match jobs. All right, so let me go to the Q&A here. These are all good questions. So the first question is, this person is saying, and I don't know why I'm unable to copy it, but the first question is, I'm transitioning from, I noticed my career is highly saturated let me just see if this works now. Good. Here we go. I got it. So if you stayed on, this is great. I apologize. So the person says, I've noticed that the market in my region is highly saturated with similar candidates. Can you suggest a specific strategy to differentiate myself from others, particularly when it feels like law firms are looking for candidates with a substantial book of business? And let me just hear substantial book of business. Okay, so this person is saying that there's a lot of people like them and only looking for people with business, which is very common for people with a lot of business. And without business, what do you do? And I had a long conference call with someone that I placed years ago that was unemployed yesterday, had been unemployed for half a year. And he was senior and worked in New York and lost his job when he got senior, which is very common. So firms that are only looking for candidates for business, this is actually pretty simple. So what do? You apply to smaller firms. So that's the first thing, to smaller firms in your market. I'll do some examples of that in a little bit. When we're done with this, I'll do a screen share of our database. So you only do apply to smaller firms in your market is the first thing. And so you find smaller firms. You can do that. Well, I'll show you how to do that with just Google. Google, you can search, for example, if you're a corporate attorney, you can search for just in Google corporate law firms in city name. And that will basically, city name, that will pull up a ton of firms that you wouldn't even be aware of. Google's very good at finding firms. The reason they are is because they go and they look at the websites of the firms, like automatic, and then they see if they do, for example, corporate work. And if they do, they return them. And they will return an incredible number of firms. It will blow your mind almost in every market. So you do that. And then the other thing you do is you apply to firms. This is firms in smaller markets. If you're in Los Angeles, for example, you could apply to firms in Sacramento, Bakersfield, all these different places that would have openings, would be interested in you. This is just an example. If you would apply to firms there, and you would do it regardless of whether or not the firm has an opening. And why do you do that? Because firms in Bakersfield, and Sacramento is actually a bigger market, but if you apply to firms in Bakersfield, there are large companies that are in Bakersfield. There are people that need corporate attorneys in Bakersfield, and you would never think of applying to firms in Bakersfield, but you do. Because if you do without openings, those firms have work that they can give you regardless of whether or not they have openings, because good people don't come along in those markets. So because good people don't come along, when you apply to them, they'll look at you, because not a lot of people are applying to firms in Bakersfield. And Bakersfield is not the area where most people are going to be interested in, and applying to firms in smaller markets works. I have attorneys all the time, senior corporate attorneys, senior litigators, senior IP attorneys that are sitting there trying to apply to the same jobs that everyone else is in their market, or applying to only the large firms that they know, and then they go and they find smaller firms. So I'll give an example of how to do that. I'll show you in the BCG database when I get through these questions how to do that, and I'll show you why that works. This always works. It doesn't matter if you have business or not, because all you need to do find firms is to find firms that may have the work that you can't firms with work. So that's it. You just need to be able to find firms with work. And so this is what most people don't do. Most people, again, are just sending their resume blindly to all of these firms that they think are good prospects because they're in the major markets. So they'll apply to the large firms, but you just need to find firms with work. And if you find a firm with work, they're going to hire you, especially if you have good qualifications. It works like that all the time. I had a conversation yesterday with a firm in Irvine, and I sent them a attorney that was very senior, that did trust and estates law, and without an opening, I sent them to that firm, and I had a long conference call with this firm. And not long, but 45 minutes. And they were interested in this person, even though they didn't have a trust in the estates opening. He was very senior, like probably in his mid to late 60s. And they saw him and, hey, we have a trust in the estates work. We can hire this person, even if they don't have openings. I had another woman I did this with in Denver, and the same thing happened. Like I sent her to firms without openings, and she got 3 or 4 interviews. Not in Denver, she was applying, because it wasn't in Denver she was applying. It was in smaller markets like Aspen and Vail. But they were like, hey, we could hire this person. And she got 3 or 4 interviews. And she had so many jobs lined up and she wasn't expecting it, that in a couple cases she just ghosted us, like because she had too many jobs and what do I do? And so for a couple of the firms, she got offers and didn't respond and ended up taking one of our offers. But this people can get jobs in so many different ways if they are applying to places without openings like this, like my candidates do. And these are people that normally would be believe that they're completely, it's very difficult for them to get a job. Okay, so the next question is, I took a 2-year break from practicing law full-time. How can I best present to a 2-year break practicing law full-time to get a full-time MBA? How can I best present this gap on my resume and interviews to highlight the value it brings rather than being seen as a red flag? Before my MBA, I worked as a litigation associate for 4 years. Now I want to transition into a business development role. Okay, business development role within a law firm, leveraging both my legal and business expertise. However, I'm concerned that the employment gap may hinder my search. Okay, so MBAs are actually interesting. I've had this job, MBAs for attorneys, I guess is a good way to put it. What happens? I had something very interesting happen to me when I was just starting my legal career as a recruiter. I had a candidate that had been a corporate attorney prior to going to get his MBA. And he went and got his MBA and he didn't do well because he, didn't have the same kind of whatever skills or the math and things that normal MBAs have. He got this MBA from U and he was looking for a job after 3 or 4 years of experience. And my first placement ever was at Latham & Watkins, which I still have so much gratitude to this firm and just making first placement. And I remember it was like a Monday or something, and they called at like 7 a.m. The woman there was cool. Her name was Pilar or something. She rode a motorcycle to work over the bridge in San Francisco to Palo Alto or whatever, this firm every day. But anyway, she called. She was early enough for you, and I was like, yeah. And she said they were going to make this guy an offer, and they didn't have an opening, and he was just blown away because his job paid more than anyone in his class that had gotten a job, his MBA class with companies and so forth. So he was very happy. An MBA is not necessarily a gap. It's actually very highly valued by firms, especially for people that want to do corporate work, value for corporate attorneys. But your question is, can you get a business development role within a law firm? And the answer is yes. Yeah. But you have to remember that what you're doing is you're competing with everyone else that may be, and they may not be MBA, and most of them aren't going to be attorneys, but you're competing with everyone else that already does that. So what does that mean? Anytime that you're trying to apply for a job, you have to remember, or a firm, you have to remember that firms are going to hire the people that are the best candidates. And in most cases, like somebody that has a history doing a certain type of work, meaning have a history doing business development, you're much more likely to get a job. Just think about who you would hire. So I always like to give this example, like who would you hire? So say you have 2 jobs and you're looking for a nanny. You hire someone that you have your choices between a handyman working in your house or a nanny, experienced nanny. Who are you going to hire? You're going to hire the person that is an experienced nanny. You probably wouldn't hire the handyman if you have an opening. That's just very important to understand, because anytime you're applying for a job, you're going to want to hire someone that has that experience. If you were applying for a litigation job, you're going to have a much more better chance of getting a job probably in litigation. But the problem with getting an MBA is it's not really related to litigation. It's related to business. And so if you're trying to get a job related to, if you're a corporate attorney, that's actually considered a great thing. But if you're trying to get a job doing something else, it's going to be much more difficult, because business development isn't something that's necessarily taught in an MBA. So that's difficult. Your strategy needs to be you apply to every firm, saying you want to do that, to every firm and market, with the resources, with the work to hire you, meaning they're going to need someone that already does that type of work. They're going to potentially be interested in you. You're going to have to make a compelling case. But in most cases, you know why you want to do it. But in most cases, what I would recommend, you're going to have to network. Networking is going to be more effective because you're going to have to. Firms aren't just going to take someone that's a litigator that got an MBA for a business development role. You wouldn't either. So you networking, you meet people, talk to them about that. So meet people, talk to them about that, and so that would be the best way of doing it. But my concern with doing this is it's not related to what you do or what your experience is or what the MBA is. Anytime you're doing something like that, you need to really think about would the law firm hire you. Some people with that type of background might even try doing something along the lines of starting their own business development type of marketing firm or something to do that. That's more effective. So there's all sorts of places that do that. So there's companies in New York that do that, and all sorts of places that find them, so then apply there. So that's one strategy. So what does that mean? You look for, just do a search on Google, marketing services for law firms, and you would, or marketing law firm marketing companies. And so I will show you that search in a little bit. But if you do it right now, and you start looking at bigger cities, you can find probably companies that do that that you could work for. And that would probably be much more effective than trying to work in a law firm initially. You would find the marketing company, and then that marketing company would be interested in you because of your experience. So sorry for spending a lot of time people on this particular question, but it's very good. So it's a very good question. So that's how I would handle that. And you can definitely get a job. You're just going to have to you're going to have to find companies like that. Once you get the experience in a marketing company, then apply to firms later, because then you actually have the skills that are proven to do that type of work. So you definitely can do it. I hope this answers your question, because a lot of people never think this way, and that's what hurts them. Okay, let's see here. Next question. And I'm excited actually to doing some sample searches for you. Okay, I've spent the past 5 years working in a compliance role for major corporations. What are the best ways to position this experience and applying to in-house counsel position, given my role is not purely legal? In my compliance role, I work closely with legal department, but did not perform traditional trade tasks. I'm now looking into a general counsel position and need advice on how to position my skills effectively. Okay, so your same issue. How do you sell something you're not doing? That's scary, right? So you're trying to sell something you're not doing. Why would a big company hire you for work you don't do, for work you do not do? So what would that be? That would be general, corporate, whatever they do. So you're asking a firm to hire you for work that you don't necessarily do. So why would they hire you? You have to really think about that. If you're applying to jobs, there's not really any reason for them to hire you, because you're competing with others that have that experience. If it's an opening, that's your problem. So you're applying to firms others that have that experience if it is an opening. So the next thing, you just want to, so your question is, what do you do? What do you do to get those jobs? The nice thing about corporate related openings is smaller companies, especially ones led by founders or newer companies, have no idea about what an attorney is. Companies have no idea who to hire, right? They have no idea. They don't really know. They know law school, other things, but they don't really know who to hire. They don't really understand it. So you have to understand what it is exactly you do. So your strategy, and it works. It works incredibly well. So this is just a quick thing that I had happen. When I was working in Pasadena, my best friend had worked in a big law firm and then had gotten a position in a smaller law firm. Had gotten a position in-house with this company. He saw that they were doing all of these illegal things, like they were forging reports, making up information to reports to government agencies, and it was SEC, where they were and he didn't want to participate in it, and he didn't want to do anything unethical, so they fired him, and then he was just devastated. He's, what do I do with my career? I don't have a job. This is horrible. And so I saw that, and I was like, this poor guy, what's he going to do? And so I saw that, and I started helping him send his resume to all of these companies all over Los Angeles that didn't have openings, but they were, smaller, mid-sized companies. And I remember he was on a speakerphone in our office, and this call came in, and the woman was like, wow, I can't believe I'm getting a resume from a talented corporate attorney like you. I run this restaurant chain, own this restaurant chain of like pizzas or something, and all over Los Angeles. I'd love to hire someone like you. Can you come in? And he got a bunch of those calls and couldn't believe it, because when he was working in this major law firm, he was applying to the few in-house openings that kind of came up here and there, and not getting anything, and eventually got this job. And he'd been applying to in-house openings for years. And then he did the strategy of just sending out all these resumes and got all these jobs with companies that he never would have thought to apply to, and didn't even have GC openings or anything like that, and was able to get a bunch of jobs. That's what you do. Like, you have to be applying to lots of places that don't necessarily have openings. And if you do that, you're going to be incredibly well off compared to, what might happen if you just applied to places looking for general counsels, because those places are going to have a better idea of what to look for. Your strategy needs to be to try to find companies and apply to them regardless of whether they have openings. Now, there's other things you can do that people do. You could make your experience in your resume sound more legal related. You could put in keywords, not keywords, but you could write something that passed off as a kind of someone that was an expert and could do different types of corporate law. But you could work on your resume and make in a way that could, for places without openings, you could work on your resume to make sure that it makes sense So that's something that you need to do, and in order to get a position. So that's what the strategy I follow. It would work. You can buy a list of all the companies in a area that you want to work in that do different things, and you could apply to them that way. I'm sorry for all this detail, but I want to make sure that I help you with these questions. Okay, and I am excited to do some examples in our database and so forth in a minute. Okay, so let's see the next one. Next question. Okay, I have extensive experience in negotiation and mediation from my family law practice, and I've completed several corporate law courses. However, convincing and potential employers by my ability to handle corporate legal matters has been difficult. I'm looking to transition to corporate law practice. What are the most effective ways to overcome the lack of relevant experience, and how can I highlight my skills? Okay, so this is sad. Lots of people go to school after practicing in a given practice area. What does that mean? If you think that you want to do something else, and then you go take all these courses and go to school, you have to ask yourself, who you're competing with? What are law firms likely to think of the fact that you got experience in a different practice area than the one you're doing? So this is very common. I talk to attorneys. This is, again, like a conversation that I have a lot. I talk to attorneys that may have a school, for example, they want to become data privacy. So they take all these classes to learn about data privacy, and then they get this SIP or whatever qualification to think that law firms are going to hire them after they've been in a certain practice area. The problem with working in a practice, and the problem with going to a new practice area that you have to think about is, again, who would you hire? Who would you hire? Would you hire a family law attorney with some courses in corporate, or would you hire, or an experienced corporate attorney? You have to think about, what would you do if you were hiring someone? Who would you hire? And this is an important question. So my point is that if you hire an experienced corporate attorney, like, that's obviously a better hire, because the person has training, experience, skills, right? And if someone's going to hire you, like in your family law attorney, you're not going to get that training from a law firm. You're not going to get that experience from a law firm, and you're not going to develop those skills. Corporate is much different than family law. And I'll just explain this to you in a little bit. So corporate attorneys it's a lot of like very advanced, I don't know how to explain it, but a lot of it is very advanced. You need to be an attorney, but it's very advanced
not clerical, but I don't know, clerical. I'm probably not saying this correctly. I'm clerical type work. So it's being perfect research. I'm not explaining it probably correctly, but it's much different than family law. So family law, you're getting all this drama, you're getting all this, you're getting people on different sides with different opinions and negotiating things, which I guess is a little bit helpful, but it's not, it's the skills are different than family law. That just means that your skills as a family law attorney many times, and again, I'm not being critical of this practice here, the people that do it, but you're working for people that don't have, so working for companies is more, and that's what a corporate attorney in a law firm does, is more demanding of and than working for an individual. Sorry, give me a second. Family law matter, right? Sorry, give me a second. With the family law, that just means someone that's family law, you can go in and make typos. There's not a lot of individuals often are not spending a lot of money. So the work you're doing is different. You have to control fees. Whereas if you're working for companies as a corporate attorney, it's just much different. And so you need to be aware of what are they expecting. It's just different training. So, again, the only way to succeed, the best way to succeed is to look at smaller markets. So I'll tell you a quick story. Look at smaller markets. So how does that work? Canada, not too long ago, and she really wanted to do environmental law, but she was a patent attorney. Like she had gone to University of Michigan Law School. Before that, she'd gone to school to be an engineer. And she really was talented in terms of I'm sorry, give me a second. She was very talented in terms of being a patent attorney. Had no environmental experience. There was nothing on her resume that indicated that's who she was, but she was able to get a job with a very good mid-sized firm in Sacramento from working in San Francisco. Looking at smaller markets is important, preferably even with opening, if your qualifications are off, if your qualifications are really strong in something else. If they're not, then you just need to apply to firms without openings, apply to smaller firms. And what you do is if you get hired with that, and I'll show you an example of how you can find an incredible number of firms. But if you get hired by one of those firms, then you get the experience and then you move.
Okay, so this next person says, this is actually another good question. Let me see. Here I got it. This person says, I really appreciate all these questions. The ones are very good. So I am transitioning from a career in academia to, let me just see here 1 second. I'm transitioning from a career in academia to practicing law. What are key points I should emphasize to address skepticism? Sorry, what are key points I should do to address skepticism from law firms about my ability to be in a more commercial environment? Okay, I really like this question because I've seen this particular thing happen a lot with people. So people will be working in want to be transition from academia to a law firm. So here's the problem with that. This particular type of thing is very common with attorneys. I've seen this happen quite a bit. People will be in academia and try to transition. I don't like this particular problem because it's actually a fairly serious problem if you're trying to do that. So people that are in academia, it's being a law professor or being in academia is much different than working in a law firm. Much different, much different. And I speak to attorneys all the time that try to do that, and it's very difficult because academia is theoretical, meaning very theoretical, and sorry, I'm just writing this down. And when you're in academia, your job is typically to think about things, write long papers, law review articles, teach a few classes, not have a lot of micromanaging of your time. So you can teach a few classes, think about things, do office hours, network with other attorneys, other people in school, and that sort of thing. And practicing law is actually very practical because You have to quicker solutions to problems to problems clients have. And so you will be doing work that you may be, if you're in litigation, you'll be doing discovery and writing motions and all that kind of stuff you'll be doing. Clients have. And so if that isn't necessarily the type of career or the type of work that an attorney does, it's much different and very practical. And those skills of thinking about things and talking and having long conversations about the law and stuff doesn't really happen in law firms. And so most academics that go into law firms won't stay there long. The most common example, people that go to Yale Law School, Yale. So they typically a lot of times will come out and decide that they want to maybe try a law firm, and they go to a law firm and it just never works out because they want to think about things in a different way. It doesn't collaborate. The other thing is you've already made a choice. So you've already cast your lot not to work in law firms. So you've made that choice for a reason. You made that choice because that's who you are. Sorry, Keith. You've already made the choice. And so because you've already made that choice, you're not necessarily going to succeed. And you made that choice. There was a reason for it, but you did it because that was what you're interested in. So how do you convince a law firm? But the same way that I've recommended it. If no law firm is going to hire you, maybe if you went to working at a major law school or something, but most of the time, no law firm is going to hire you with an opening. Who would you hire? Would you hire someone who's interested and has done nothing but that practice area for 3 years? Or would you hire someone who would you hire? You have to just think about that. Who would you hire? You would almost certainly hire someone that already has that experience and is shown interest. So that's the issue. So that's who you would hire. Who is a person? And there's just no reason you wouldn't. Why would you? What do? You do the same thing that I've recommended. You apply to firms without openings. You may apply to firms, people in firm, that maybe went to your law school. It's one thing. So you would find those people and tell them you want to work there, or because they might like that. Your law school you're teaching at, they might like. And the other thing you do is you just start applying to firms, apply to firms that you do that. You apply to firms without openings, but you can do that in smaller markets, smaller firms. When I say smaller firm, maybe 20 attorneys, smaller firms, because they're more likely to hire you if you have experience. And sometimes you may have taught corporate law or tax law or something, or which would be more helpful if you're trying to do corporate. You may have taught, I don't know, something related to litigation, but that's the only way you're going to get a job, because why would someone hire you if you don't have the experience? And a lot of times people in your situation feel they're smarter than, I don't know, people feel they're smart. But the problem is that you've made this choice already. And if you don't have the experience practicing in a law firm, then it's not an easy transition, because or people like you feel smart. It's unlikely to work out. And that's just how it is. And people in academia typically are there and don't like law firms. And so they do that. So my advice to you is just to apply to places without openings. But it's a very difficult transition. And I like this question because a lot of people want to do this in your situation, but they hardly ever work out. Their interests lie elsewhere. There's some events for law professors and deans of law schools and things at Pepperdine, for example, each year. And I have, because I live and work in Malibu, sometimes deans of law schools stuff will ask me to meet because they're interested in kind of the stuff. And when they do, I talk to them, and I'm always amazed at just like how they just go off on these tangents talking about different ideas. And when you're a lawyer in a law firm, you cut to the chase and will give very quick answers to things. But when people try to do this when you try to do this in a law firm, it's not something that works. And so it's just a different way of thinking about issues. Lawyers in law firms tend to be very direct. they plow through stuff. And that's just something to even think about. Like, how does that necessarily work when you're a lawyer in a law firm? It's a different way of thinking. So I'm spending a lot of time on this answer because it's actually a very common thing, and it very rarely works out. Law firms may hire you if you have some incredible background, like you went to University of Chicago or Stanford or something or whatever, or Harvard, but it tends to be very difficult to make the transition. Okay. And I think that it's very difficult. So you always need to find places without openings that are likely to be interested in you regardless of that. Okay. So let's see here. I am currently a mid-level associate in a law firm and discreet looking for new opportunities due to limited growth opportunities in my firm. I'm concerned about confidentiality and the potential repercussions if a job search is discovered. How can I manage an active job search while maintaining my current position without jeopardizing my job security? Okay, so lawyers in law firm, which are very discreet, so they will very rarely talk to your firm or tell people in your firm about it, that you're searching for a job or contacting them. Because if they did that, who in the world would ever apply to that firm? Because they would not get new applicants. No one would apply to that. As a recruiter, having worked with thousands, if not 10,000 plus candidates, I only saw that happen once. It happened because I actually saw it happen twice. And this is after working with, let's talk about 10,000 candidates. I saw it happen with a candidate one that had been fired from his law firm for committing a crime. So an ethical, a serious ethical thing. I don't know if it was a crime, we could call it a crime, but a very serious ethical issue. And it involved the firm that he applied. So what happened is he done something very wrong, and involved from your. So he had done something very wrong, and because of what he had done, the other firm, when they got their application, called the firm that had fired him and said, this guy applied to your firm. And so then the firm that he had worked at, he was no longer there, called me and you shouldn't be representing this guy. It got back to us that he had applied to this firm. So he wasn't even employed when this happened, but it got back. I had another issue with the same thing that happened with a candidate in Wisconsin. He was a patent attorney, and he had applied to a firm that didn't know about this serious ethical thing he did. Again, it wasn't applied. He got hired, and when he got hired, he went on the website, and the firm was like, oh my God, I have to warn this firm. So that happened that time. When candidates apply on their own, this is another thing. When applying on your own in smaller markets, and not necessarily in corporate-facing jobs, meaning you're not working for a company. You might be working in insurance defense or something. Would it be whatever? It's a small market, and I would say to small firm, small to very small, meaning solo practitioners. If you're applying to a firm like that, then those firms that you're applying to, if you're applying to an individual, sometimes you can't trust that individual. They're whatever, there's things wrong with them in terms of their ability to deal with the ethical thing, to not talk to firms about you. But large, mid-sized firms, or firms doing work for companies will never work for companies, never disturb your confidentiality. That would be insane, because if they did that, you would tell other people, the word would get around very quickly that they did that, and they would just stop getting applicants. I just don't think that's a major concern. I don't know where your practice area is. If you're in commercial litigation representing companies, if you're in patent law, if you're in whatever, almost all practice areas that work for companies, they're almost never going to say anything. The only time they would say anything would be if you'd done something wrong at your existing firm or fired and word got around and that firm knew about it, or if you were trying to apply to individuals. So I've seen that happen, not through BCG, but I've seen a lot of people that say you're in a small market, like a very small market. I'm just giving you an example, like Muskegon, Michigan, which has some firms in it, but a lot of people, like, they are doing work for individuals, maybe, I don't know, personal injury or something. competitive with other firms, and then you apply to that person and maybe they don't have ethic, something happens there. But I don't think in general, and this is a good question, do you have to worry about word getting back to your employer when you're applied for jobs? Almost never. And I've seen it happen with people that have done something wrong and gotten fired. You're currently employed, and I've seen it happen with not through BCG, but through when people are applying to very small firms with like a couple attorneys or something in a market where they might be competitive with other people there, just losers, to be honest with you, that would do something like that. That's happened to candidates before, not through BCG, but then that way. So another thing, recruiter candidates will almost never have word get back. So why is that? Because a recruiter, if you mess with a recruiter, the firm will never. The firm will never do anything. Will never put word out, because if you screw with the recruiter, I've been in business for 25 years. So if a firm does that to me, I would tell every candidate that they did that. I would be all over it. So that's something you need to be very aware of, that if you mess with a recruiter, it's never going to send that person to candidate again. Not only that, but they'll tell every candidate that they work with in the future that they shouldn't apply there. They will tell other recruiters. So it's very dumb for people, for a law firm to do that. Okay. Just question done. Okay. So right now I'm going to go, it looks like most of these questions are going to be related to different thing, trying to find different types of jobs in different practice areas. So give me 1 second. I'm going to pull up the BCG database and see if I can help you with some of these searches. And I'm just going to show you some ways to find a position. And this will actually be very interesting for you, because for people that are looking for a position. So right now I'm pulling up some just the BCG database to try to help with some of these questions that people have about searching for jobs in different practice areas. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is go into BCG. These are not real candidates. So I'm going to just pull these up and show you some examples of candidates and how I would search for jobs. Now, this particular example, this first one is patent attorneys. This person wants to find a job that asked a question, and I'll just push this up here, in Northern Colorado. So this person does patent infringement. What I'm going to do here is this person is looking for a job in Northern Colorado. So I'm going to this person's a patent attorney. So I'm going to set up their practice area just to someone that, not this person says they do IP litigation in their resume. I'm going to just set up the practice area to do a different type of patents. Now, one of the things I'm showing you here is all these practice areas. So when you start looking at all these, there's in the BCG database, because probably the only people in the world that does this, but we have all these different practice areas. When you go and you look at IP litigation, for example, you have IP general, you have IP litigation, you have litigation, all these different things, like different types of things, but you also have patent. So I'm going to say you're a patent attorney. I'm going to say, just for argument's sake, that you're a patent attorney doing hard sciences. Maybe you don't do mechanical, but I'm just going to say that you just do all this different types of patent work. Okay, then you say you're looking for a position. This person says they have 30 years of experience, and they're looking for a position in Northern Colorado. So I would go here, the regions. I don't know if I'm just putting in regions here I don't even know Northern Colorado. Probably not going to have something like that. No, but just real quick, I don't know, cities in Northern Colorado. Northern Colorado cities. Just give me 1 second here. Major city. So you have, let's see, Fort Collins, Greenlee, Georgetown. So I'm just going to say, Boulder. Is Boulder Northern Colorado? Boulder is Northern Colorado. Boulder and Denver. Okay, this is very easy. So I'm just going to say that you're looking for positions, and I'm going to say you're looking for positions in Denver, whatever. So this isn't showing the regions, but I'm just saying you're looking for jobs in Denver. And you can't see my screen right now, but it's I'm putting in these regions. So I'm going to say 15 miles with Colorado. Okay, that. Okay, so I put in Northern Colorado into your regions. So Peter Highcomb, just an example. And then these are what the heck? Denver, which is the person again. Give me one sec. I don't know what run there. For some reason, I'm not able to save this ridiculous screen. I don't know what's wrong here, but okay, let me just here review jobs when it comes up. Okay, so these are examples of, I just looked at jobs and all these firms. These are actually big firms. So you're going to see here that they're unlikely to have positions for people at your level, but this particular job doesn't necessarily say the level. These are jobs that you could find. I don't think many of these firms, says 1 year, are going to be interested in you because in general, see 2 to 6. In general, the larger firms are always junior to mid-level, are always going to be looking for, but this is interesting, smaller firms see here. So they're looking for someone with 5+ years. That would be a firm you can apply to. So firms like this, by the way, smaller firms, like firms that don't have big names, are always likely to be more interested in you. This type of firm, Holland Hart, well-known firms, typically aren't going to be interested in someone like you, but you can certainly try applying. But 30 years of experience, most law firms, the big law firms, are going to want people that are going to have less than 10 years of experience, because once you get to that level, you're a partner, and they want people that are going to move, they're going to work that way. I'll look at some other jobs. These are just jobs in law crossing. There's nothing, but then you could look at, this is BCG archive jobs that you could find on law crossing. So I'm going to look at older jobs, and there's a lot of firms here that are older. But again, I just know these firms, and these are all larger firms, except for maybe Sheridan and Ross. But again, they're looking for 1 to 5 years. So most of the openings you're going to see are going to be looking for people. These are the openings that we have. This firm, Lady Boy, possibly 3+ years, but most law firms are going to be looking for people. If you're looking at openings, I'm just showing everyone here as an example. But this firm is 8+ years. That would actually be a place you could apply to. You need to look at these types of things. This is actually an archive job, meaning it's an older job. It closed in November of 2023, but that could be a potential job you could work at. So you have that. So I've shown you this, like the positions you could potentially apply to. This is how I would recommend is finding a lot of these smaller firms, older jobs. So the big question you're asking is, how do you find a position in Northern Colorado? So I go here and I look at recommended firms. I have 33 firms that do this type of work. These are all places that you could apply to. These firms are ranked from 1 to 3. 3 means they're just a mid-sized firm without giant clients and so forth. So these are all places you could apply to, potentially you could work at, because they do that type of work. You can see here they do all this type of work. These are smaller firms. Most people, when they're searching for a job, are not going to be applying to these types of smaller firms. I'm just showing you some examples. I don't know what that was going on there, but that you can apply to. So these smaller firms and that sort of thing. So those are recommended firms. But then there's other things you can do too. If you were our candidate, I would just IP Patent General. What I would do is these are IP Patent hard sciences general. So you can look at firms in Denver that do that type of work. Now we've got 19 here. So these are all firms that do that sort of work in the Denver region that we could apply to. But finally, what I would be doing, I would go to Google and I would go patent law firms, Denver. So you go and you look there, and you have all of these different places that you could apply to. And I'm just showing you here, there's an incredible number of them. Just if we scroll down, I can't scroll the screen, but when you look at, for some reason, this isn't scrolling very well. I don't know what that was going on, but you can look at all of these different firms that do that work in Denver, and you can find them doing a search on Google. So, and just, you can see all of these different things. These are sponsored firms, or they're paying to be there. You have all of these businesses that do it. So a different firm, and there's just a ton of them. So I'm scrolling through them here. There's just those patents, Alcoboa Law, whatever the hell that is, the Inventor's Friend patent law firm. There's just all these firms. There's just so many firms. And what I would do is I would just be sending my resume to all of these places that do this sort of work. So this firm here, let's go to look at the website real quick, how you do that. So they say they do intellectual property. They learn more. But you have, these are the firms that do it. There's only 2 attorneys there. It looks like they're These are husband and wife. So I would probably send this guy an email saying you're a patent attorney, and with your resume, he may have jobs. And this is a small firm that's going to be off the radar of most people. And so they're not going to be applying there. And that's how I would be doing my search. It's just your 180 Law. They do this patent engineering LLC, like who knows what the hell that is. But again, finding these little firms around Denver is just going to be like a really good way to do things. And I don't know what the hell this thing is, but you can see here they've done all of these different types of patents. And so I would recommend finding these sorts of firms. And again, this sort of search is not something that most people would do. They wouldn't look for a job this way, but this is what works. And so I'm just showing you that if I was an attorney and I was you, this is exactly what I would do to find an opening. I would look at all of these places and then you would get a job. That's pretty much how it works. This particular guy, Treasurer Law Firm, I don't know what's going on there, but this is what you do and this is what works. Pretty much anyone that is looking for a position like you are can get a position. But you have to do things that other people aren't, which means you have to do the work of contacting people. And I'm not saying these are all patent attorneys, but you have to look at these websites and find them. You can also do it that way that I just did, but you can also do it just going through and scrolling through and finding every one of these firms. There's 10 plus pages of results. And so you have Yelp, you have all these different places. And then sometimes you go to these type of, you see this sort of thing, you can go to these listings of these different patent attorneys. So there are so many freaking people. I don't care what area of the country you are. There are so many people that do this work. And so finding them is not that difficult. And here, 2019 largest patent attorneys in Denver, you have all these. So there's so many places, I guess I'm showing you can apply to that almost no one does. And that's going to be a tremendous benefit to you doing things. Okay, so here's another search. So I'm just going to go to a random thing. This person says they're looking for and again, I'm just going to, no, that's not a good one. Sharma. Let's not go. The person's in India. I'm just going to take up a freaking, okay, this person says they want to, I'm just making up a practice here for you. I'm just going to go into this thing and see this person does international trade criteria, international trade. Let's go. You know, if I have international trade, let's find the practice area. Give me a second here. There, government. Okay, international trade. This person says they do international trade work. They're also saying they want to work remotely. Let's go to this potential regions. Just give me a second here. They want to work remotely. So I don't know where the heck this person is, but let me just see if I can just do United States. I can't. So let's say the person, I'm just in international trade. They want to work in Washington, D.C. There, I'm going to put down, what else? I'll put down some big areas. I'll put down New York. I don't know that this person says just from New York State. And I'll do maybe Virginia. Yeah, I don't know. Just adding some regions. Virginia, and then I'll put down, what are some other areas? North of New York, United States, Virginia, trying to think some other areas. The person might be, I don't know, California. California, sure, the bar is going to be difficult, but I'm just putting on it. I'm just doing this for the sake of having an example. Okay, so this person wants to do that in all of these regions. So I'll go look at jobs. I don't know how much experience this person has, but I'm looking at international trade jobs in all these areas. And you can see here, there's a lot of openings. There's 3 to 7. Most of these are going to be here, senior international trade in Washington, D.C. That's a good job. And again, I'm putting it down in firms now. A lot of these are major firms, but when you start looking at smaller firms, you might have a better chance. I'll just do an example. Maybe Law Crossing has some of the GMIST. This is one reason I recommend people look at Law Crossing, because Law Crossing may have jobs. And this is a job probably that wasn't on 3+ years. That might not have been in BCG. So it's always good to look at Law Crossing. Then I'll just show you some recommended firms that we have that we would help you apply to. And these are 212 freaking firms that do international trade that we have recommended. We've recommended them because they may have interviewed people. Paragon Laws interviewed people for international trade. The last one was in, looks like August of 2024. Sometimes we're just looking at them because they may be ranked on Vol, US News, Chambers, like all these sorts of sites, then we'd be right there. So that is a place that you could apply to. Then we also just, I'll just show you an example. Where's this person? Olaf, international trade. So I'm just not necessarily recommended firms. A recommended firm means they might be on some list or something for that practice area. Like I showed you all things. Then you could also do a search for this person, their preferred location, which is Washington, D.C. There's 105 firms that do that work. A lot of these are small, like Aaron Law. I don't know what the hell's going on there, but they do have international trade. It's a small firm that people would miss normally. This is how you do searches. This is how you look for firms. And I'm just showing you, so far we found hundreds of firms, and then you could go. And by the way, here I just looked at firms to Washington, D.C. But now when I look at firms, other areas, it looks like there's international trade is obviously the biggest region. If you want to apply remotely to these people, you can tell them you want to work remote. That's how it works. And then the other thing would just be searching Google for a firm that do international trade. And you have all these different firms. Law offices of Robert Nagish. I don't know what the hell that is. That's probably one guy. You go in there and that firm, and you can see that they does international trade, or his firm does. So you have all these different places that you can apply to that no one else is really doing anything with. Think about how strong, what a great thing this is. Here's ranking there's BCG as best international trade. And then you have all of these firms. Oh, this is on BCG. So you have all these firms that BCG has ranked that do this sorts of work. And then you just keep looking at all these firms, just tons and tons of firms you can find at BCG. So my point is that you want to be applying to find as many possible places as you can. And it's really, frankly, not that difficult. It's something that anyone can do. It's not that difficult. You just find all these positions and then you apply to them regardless of, whether or not they have openings. And look at all this. This is just freaking insane. So there's just so many places. It's just ridiculous. But this is what people don't do. People don't do this when they're searching for jobs. I don't know why, but they don't. So you have to look at all of these different types of places to apply to. And this is what most people are doing. This is what's going to change your life and your career. Okay, so let me just see here. So these are, unfortunately, people didn't ask more questions about this. I know several hundred people in this webinar, but that's how you find places to apply that other people aren't going after. I appreciate everyone being on this webinar today. I hope you learned a lot. Honestly, if you learn and understand what I'm talking about, you would have really no problem getting positions. You're going to be in very good shape. And that's what I would recommend that you do. You need to apply to places without positions. You need to do research on Google. You need to look at various lists and so forth. And if you do that, you're going to be in very good shape for your searches and your career. It's going to change your life if you do it, because most people aren't doing that. So thank you very much for being on this webinar. I hope everyone learned a lot. I apologize I wasn't able to do a webinar last week, the 4th of July, but next week I hope we'll also have a very good webinar with this particular topic. I think you stayed on this webinar, you learned a lot. People that do this, that some of this advice I'm getting just really can make a huge difference in your life. So thanks again, and I will see everyone hopefully next week.